Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you, yes, you, and also the person behind you and next to you also. Wow, big crew. Thank you. Bringing you yet another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training. And in this edition, we are going to be covering the 6 big mistakes that coaches or instructors might make when implementing fitness and adapted physical education programs for the autism and neurodivergent population. Why 6 instead of the popular top 3? Well, I wanted to give you double is number 1. Number 2, we're going to go through this via the PAC profile. That's physical, adaptive, and cognitive. And those are the 3 areas of ability that we are always assessing and addressing when we are implementing programs for the autism and neurodivergent population. So I thought, well, instead of giving one from each, one mistake, there are plenty of mistakes that can be made. In fact, this video isn't even going to cover all of them. There are plenty of big mistakes, medium mistakes, smaller mistakes, but I want to help you avoid those in your program. So I'm actually going to give you 2 from each one of those areas of ability, the physical, the adaptive, and the cognitive. And of course, before I get into that, please definitely subscribe. And if this content has been valuable for you so far, share the Autism Fitness with your colleagues, with your friends, with other professionals who might derive some significant benefit from this. And of course, if you're ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, head on over to autismfitness.com. You can learn more about the curriculum. You can register and begin your coursework today and join me for your virtual or in-person practical anywhere in the world. Dates and locations are all on the website. So let's look at the 6 big mistakes that coaches and instructors can make through the lens of the PAC profile. Of course, the PAC profile is the standard operating program for autism fitness, physical, adaptive, and cognitive. So physically, we're looking at the exercises themselves. Adaptively, we're looking at motivation, reinforcement, and engagement. And cognitive, we are looking at neurological and neuromuscular. How does the individual communicate? How do they receive and process information? And then what is their body and motor awareness when they're performing the exercise? All things that we want to know. So the 2 big mistakes that are made physically when designing a program. Number 1, choosing exercises that have a low probability of generalizing to activities of daily living. So we want to choose exercises that are known, that have a great ability to generalize or show up in or develop skills that will enhance other abilities throughout the day. So those are going to be our big strengthening movements. So say it with me now if you already know this, our squats, our pushes, our pulls, our hinges, and our carries. These are going to be, in fact, we call them the foundation or foundational exercises of our programming. Now, can you deviate from this? You can. Is it going to be as effective? Certainly not. What do I mean by that? So taking a squat, for example, a squat is one of our go-to exercises for developing low body strength that we know is going to carry over to activities like walking upstairs, walking downstairs, sitting and standing, anything that requires any type of low body strength. So let's say instead of a squat, for whatever reason, someone said, oh, we're going to have our athletes do calf raises, which number 1 makes so much no sense whatsoever. But number 2 is going to elicit a response if there is a training effect from a smaller muscle group. So developing those calves isn't going to do much for the larger muscle groups in the lower body. So exercise selection and lack of understanding appropriate and effective exercise selection is definitely a big mistake. We want to choose foundational exercises and build our programs around those. So that's mistake number 1. From a physical perspective, is just choosing exercises that make no sense. I do see a lot of this going on social media with the autism and neurodivergent population without pointing things out or pointing out specific offenders. Again, not knowing the context necessarily of what they're doing, but looking at it from a just surface level, one questions why they might be choosing these exercises, but also exercises that have a lot going on at the same time. So they're balancing on one leg while pressing something overhead, and then the post or the narrative there says, oh, we're working on balance and coordination and strength at the same time. No, you're not, because all of those things are not going to happen at the same time, right? So the big mistake is the first one is often that exercise selection and choosing the right exercise. The second mistake, to make a small skip from that, is having exercises that are either too challenging or way too progressed for an individual. That's, for example, loading up an athlete with more weight when they can't even yet do body weight through full range of motion. Doesn't make any sense, is not going to further the benefit of that exercise. On the other side of that, it's having exercises that are way too simple for an individual, because you're not going to have a training effect. They're not going to get stronger, more stable, move better from something that is way too simple. Sometimes we see, oh, hop into the hula hoop and then hop out of the hula hoop. Great, they can do it over and over. It's simple. They can accomplish it, but it's not really building any relevant physical skill. It's too easy. It's also probably not the best utilization of time as far as training. So therein are your two major mistakes that are made from the physical perspective. Exercise selection as a whole, and not choosing or focusing on the foundational exercises. And the second part of that is going either too challenging, meaning too progressed, or going too simplified, what we would call a modification. If it's too modified, the athlete's not going to have a training effect, because they don't have to work harder in order to develop the skill. So let's go into the adaptive functioning. Adaptive functioning in our PAC profile is motivation and engagement, and of course, reinforcement. So one big mistake that is made, and certainly one that we never utilize in autism fitness programming, is going to be using any type of punitive or punishment measure. So if an athlete is doing an exercise incorrectly, saying, oh, well, you can't do this anymore, or you're losing, you're gonna lose your opportunity to take a break now because you're not doing it correctly. All right, so that's one way, and it makes the situation highly adversarial also, because the goal is to have the athlete actually enjoy and want to participate in physical activity. And if we're taking punitive measures here, that is not going to happen. One of the old school ways of doing this, and this goes beyond the neurotypical population, is what we call contingent exercise. And that you may remember from old school gym class, where, if you messed up or did something wrong, or you came in late, it's like, oh, go do push-ups. Like, well, what is the goal of physical education here? Well, to teach some aspect of physical performance and development. And the other part is, I don't know, to actually find something reinforcing about exercise. So you're using the same thing to punish that you want something to enjoy, which could definitely be labeled idiotic. So having punitive measures built into that is not going to build rapport, is probably not going to get the athlete focused and attending, and it's not going to be reinforcing. So that's mistake number one. Mistake number two is, from an adaptive perspective, is when an athlete is showing that they have lower motivation to participate, or they are dysregulated, trying to force the issue, or trying to get the athlete to go. Like, all right, well, go. If an athlete is engaging in stereotypy, or they're getting dysregulated, and you are trying to push a medicine ball into their hands while they're doing it, that's also going to be a no-go, and it's going to elevate anxiety, very likely. And it's also, again, going to create an adversarial situation. And then afterwards, the coach wonders, well, why aren't they having a good time? I don't know, maybe because you tried to shove a medicine ball into their hands while they were doing the exercise. So a lot of this is about meeting the athlete where they are at. And we are very serious about that in our autism fitness programming, but making sure the athlete has what they need from that adaptive perspective, whether it is the language that we're using or giving the athlete a couple extra seconds to self-regulate, we're not going to have an athlete who is looking forward to coming into the session or is willing to come into the session if we are constantly trying to interrupt with our agenda. So that is the second mistake that we see a lot. Number one is going to be that punitive measure, because it's not going to do the thing that we want it to do, and it's not going to be a reciprocal relationship with the athlete. And the second thing is interrupting the athlete when they do need a couple extra seconds. It's not going to increase their on-task performance anymore. And also, oftentimes our athletes just need a few extra seconds, maybe even a minute, to self-regulate. Okay, now we get on to cognitive functioning. Now, cognitive functioning in autism fitness programming, we divide into two categories. It's not that they don't have crossover, they do, but we look at the neurological. And in our case, we're looking at short-term memory, we're looking at communication, we're looking at information processing. And then we have the neuromuscular. The neuromuscular is all about the mind-muscle connection, if you will, and kinesthetic awareness, proprioception, all these things that kind of get lumped together. Really, it's, can they feel themselves doing the exercise? Where are their limbs in relation to full range of motion and that body control as well, which tends to be an issue or an area of challenge for many of our autism and neurodivergent athletes. Not for everybody, but for many. So the two biggest coaching mistakes from the cognitive perspective, number one, easily, by far, is overcoaching. Using way too much language and explaining over and over again what the athlete is supposed to be doing. We have in autism fitness programming, in the certification, we have the antidote to this, which is our label, demo, do, and cue process, which completely eliminates the need to explain things. But overcoaching, over-explaining is definitely the number one. Using too much language to convey something that you can demonstrate visually is by far the single biggest mistake from a cognitive perspective. And the second from a cognitive perspective is having cues that don't meet the athlete's current needs. And this is an offshoot of over-explaining also, but demonstrating a movement too fast or even too slowly sometimes, or not using language that is appropriate for that, even if it's concise, is appropriate for that particular individual's for their processing or their understanding of the exercise or the situation. So part of this is general and part of this is specific. The specific part is over-explaining is always going to be problematic for everybody, regardless of whether you're talking about someone who is neurodivergent or someone who is neurotypical. Over-explaining is going to squash progress. And the second part is understanding that particular athlete's processing or their ability to understand different words or length of sentences or the amount of instructions that you're giving them at a particular time. So for example, with some athletes, if we're giving them a two-step or a two-phase verbal direction, so it might be, okay, you have a set of push-ups, and then when you're done with push-ups, you've got band pull-downs. Well, some individuals are going to have difficulty processing those two directions, and they might just relate to or take action upon or initiate the last thing that you said. I've seen this happen numerous times where if I said you've got push-ups and then band pull downs, the athlete goes and starts doing their band pull downs because that's the last thing they had. So they were asked to do. So in this case, if we're going to keep giving 2 or 3 step directions, it's probably going to result detrimentally for the athlete and for the situation as a whole, because then you're standing there wondering, well, why aren't they doing the 2-step direction? Because that's not the way that they're processing it. They're processing it one direction at a time. And the simple fix to this is just give one exercise direction at a time. So first you've got push-ups, athlete does their push-ups. Okay, they take a break and then, okay, now you've got band pull downs, or we use a visual schedule for it, or we write it out on a board. There are numerous ways to accomplish this without having to fall into that same mistake trap over and over again, where we're giving 2 and 3-step directions and the athlete is only able to follow one of them, and then we're getting frustrated and they're getting frustrated. Easy to alleviate this by just breaking it down, one instruction at a time. All right, so there you have not just the top 3 mistakes, but 6, and they are avoidable if we have the right methodology and the right practices in place and can utilize them at the right time. So from the physical perspective, from the adaptive perspective, from the cognitive perspective, all rolled up into the PAC profile, because that's the way we need to assess and then address our athletes so that we and they have the absolute best outcome in all 3 of those areas. Physically, they're getting stronger, more stable, moving better. Adaptively, they're motivated, they're engaged to the extent that they can be, and they want to come back and keep doing fitness and keep moving, over the course of their lifetime. We're looking at this from a long-term perspective. And then cognitively, we're meeting the athlete where they're at, both with the way that we use language, the language that we're using, our voice prosody, and the way that we are teaching or coaching exercise as well. These are all majorly important things. That is not hyperbole. These are majorly important if you want your programs to be successful. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it's had a preventative effect, if not a curative effect for some of these things going on. As coaches, sometimes we need some coaching ourselves and need to understand, oh yeah, I've been doing this, I haven't even recognized it. Easy to do. All right. So those are the top 6 mistakes of coaching, and some ways to avoid or circumvent those. And I hope it's been helpful. Again, please definitely subscribe. And if this has been helpful, share it with others. I'm Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement. If, again, you are ready to become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro, head on over to autismfitness.com. Thank you for watching, and I will be back next week with another edition of Tuesday Training.